That voice in your head. It's just the ego, not you. Buddhist wisdom. Have you ever felt trapped inside your own mind? Like there's something in there always talking, always judging, always trying to fix or control things. It tells you that you need to change, that you should be better, that you need to get rid of your ego. And sometimes, it even whispers that you're close to being free. If only you could stop being the way you are. But here's the strange thing. If you listen closely to that voice, and you ask, who is it that wants to be free? The answer might surprise you. Because it's often just another part of the very ego you're trying to escape. This is one of the deepest, yet most misunderstood insights in Buddhist teaching. The idea of non-self, or anatta. It doesn't mean you don't exist. It doesn't mean you're just empty or hollow. It points to something more quiet, more subtle, but also more freeing than we can imagine. A different way of seeing who we are, without the layers we usually wear. And that starts by looking carefully at something we all carry, yet rarely understand. The ego. Chapter 1. The Ego and Its Many Masks. When most people hear the word ego, they think of someone who's arrogant, full of pride, or always showing off. But in Buddhism, ego isn't always loud. It's not always obvious. It can be very quiet. It can be kind, wounded, even spiritual. Ego is the mental habit of saying, this is me, and that is not me. It's the part of the mind that constantly builds a story about who we are and who we are not. It defines, compares, protects, and reacts all the time, even when we don't notice it. For example, when we begin to practice meditation or study mindfulness, the ego doesn't disappear. It just learns to wear new masks. It says things like, I'm a peaceful person now, or I've let go of my attachments, or even, I understand Buddhist teachings better than others. It slips into our spiritual life so gently that we might not see it. We think we're improving. But if we're honest, what's really happening is that the ego has simply taken on a new identity. One that feels safe, wise, or kind. Yet it's still doing the same thing. Keeping a sense of self. Keeping a division between me and everything else. This is where it becomes tricky. Because ego doesn't need to be loud to survive. It doesn't need to be in control. It only needs to be believed. As long as we believe in it, as long as we believe every thought that says, this is who I am, or that's not me, the ego keeps its shape. It doesn't need to win. It just needs to stay alive in our minds. Even when we try to overcome it, we're often just giving it a new form. Sometimes, it hides in our kindness. We help others, and quietly think, I'm someone who helps. Sometimes, it hides in our pain. I've been hurt, so this is who I am. Sometimes, it hides in ideas of justice, identity, success, even love. And yes, it hides on the meditation cushion too. The voice that says, now I'm doing it right, or now I'm closer to awakening. But every time we try to hold on to a version of ourselves, the ego just shifts a little and puts on another mask. That's why in Buddhism, we don't try to fight the ego. We don't try to crush it or silence it. We try to see it clearly, to observe its movement, to recognize how it creates division and tension in the mind. And when we do that, something begins to open. Not because the ego has gone away, but because we stop clinging to it. The illusion starts to fade, not through force, but through understanding. And what's left when that illusion fades isn't a better version of you. It's something softer, more free. It's not a new identity. It's not a final answer. It's the quiet awareness that never needed to be someone in the first place. Chapter 2. The Buddha's Wisdom. Not no self, but not self. Most people, when they first hear about Buddhism, think it teaches there is no self. That can sound confusing, even frightening. If there's no self, then who's listening? Who's breathing? Who's feeling pain or love or sorrow? But this is a misunderstanding. The Buddha never said, there is no self. What he taught was something more careful, more honest. He pointed to each part of our experience: body, feelings, thoughts, consciousness, and simply said, this is not me. This is not mine. This is not myself. That might sound strange at first, but he wasn't asking people to believe anything. He was asking them to look, to notice what's happening inside, not just once, but again and again. To see that what we call me is always changing. It moves, it breaks, it heals, it grows old. We can't fully control it. We don't choose our thoughts. We don't choose how the body ages. Even feelings come and go without asking. And when we really stop and look, it becomes harder to say, yes, this is truly me. That's why the Buddha didn't say, there is no self. That would just be another belief. He said something much more helpful. Look for yourself. Look at the body. Is it always the same? Can you stop it from getting tired or sick? Then can you really say, this body is me? Look at your feelings. Do they stay? Are you in charge of them? One moment joy, the next moment sadness. They rise and fall like waves. And your thoughts? Can you control what appears next in your mind? Try it. Try to predict your next thought. It doesn't work. So again, how can you say, this is mine? The Buddha taught that what we call a person is made up of 5 parts: body, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. These are called the 5 aggregates. He didn't say these things are bad or wrong. He simply said, none of them can be held as a permanent, unchanging self. And if they're not stable, not fully controllable, not ours in the way we think, then maybe we've been holding them the wrong way all along. That's what the teaching of not self, or anatta, really means. It's not a theory to argue about. It's an invitation to look closely and honestly. You don't have to force yourself to believe, I don't exist. That's not the point. You just learn to see. This thought is not me. This emotion is not mine. This body is not my true self. Not because you're denying your life, but because you're beginning to see it clearly, without holding, without clinging. And that's where freedom begins. Not by trying to erase who you are, but by gently loosening your grip on what you thought you had to be. When you stop saying mine to every passing experience, something else becomes possible. There's more space, more peace, more kindness. You're no longer caught in the trap of needing everything to match your story of me. And that story, over time, begins to soften. The edges blur. The voice of the ego loses its weight. It's not that you disappear. It's that the idea of a fixed self is seen for what it is. A habit of the mind. A helpful tool sometimes. A source of pain at other times. But not something you have to believe. And when you stop believing it, even just a little, you start to notice something deeper. Awareness, presence, a quiet way of being that isn't based on chasing or defending an identity. That's the heart of the Buddha's teaching on Anatta. Not a puzzle to solve, not a belief to follow, but a gentle truth that reveals itself, breath by breath, when we learn to stop clinging and start seeing. Chapter 3. The Trap of Trying to Kill the Ego. There's something very human about wanting to fight what we think is wrong with us. When we learn that the ego causes suffering, our first reaction might be to fix it, to control it, to beat it down, or even erase it completely. We might think, if I want to be truly spiritual, I must destroy my ego. And that belief can feel powerful, almost noble. But here's the strange thing. That very thought is ego. That inner voice saying, I must get rid of ego. Whose voice is that? It's the ego again, wearing a new costume, a spiritual one. It's like a shadow trying to chase itself. The more it runs, the more the shadow stays attached. You see, ego isn't just pride or arrogance. Ego is identification. It's the belief that I am this, or this belongs to me. So when the mind says, I want to kill the ego, it's just playing the same old game. It's still clinging to an idea of I. So what happens when you try to destroy the ego? You create tension. You push. You struggle. You sit in meditation, not to understand, but to conquer. And every time a thought appears, you judge it. Every time an emotion comes, you tighten. You try to stop it, to control it. You fight your own mind. And in that moment, you've lost sight of what the Buddha actually taught. The Buddha didn't say, destroy your ego. He didn't tell us to fight or reject anything. He offered a simple and radical invitation, to see clearly. When we see something clearly, we don't need to force it away. It loses its power naturally. The illusion fades. Trying to kill the ego is like standing in front of a mirror and being angry at your reflection. You frown at the image. You tell it to disappear. You try to wipe it away. But it's not real in the first place. It's just a reflection. And the more effort you spend on attacking it, the more confused and frustrated you become. Instead, what if you just stood quietly and saw the reflection for what it is? That's the heart of Buddhist practice. Awareness, not war. Some people think spiritual practice means becoming perfect, having no thoughts, no ego, no emotions. But that's not wisdom. That's another trap. A new identity the ego puts on. I am someone who has no ego. It sounds spiritual, but it's still grasping. Real freedom isn't about becoming someone special. It's about stopping the need to be someone at all. There's a Zen story about a student who asks his master, "How can I get rid of my ego?" The master answers, "It's very simple. Just don't believe it." No drama, no battle. Just stop feeding the voice that says, "This is me." And it's not a one-time thing. The ego might return, again and again, in different forms. But each time it appears, you don't need to panic. You don't need to suppress it. You just notice. Oh, there it is again. The voice that wants control. The feeling that wants to be right. The fear of being wrong. The mask of being spiritual. And then, let it pass. The clouds come. The clouds go. the sky remains untouched. You don't have to kill the ego. You just have to see that it was never truly alive. Chapter 4. Why we keep getting fooled and what great thinkers saw. You might be trying to see the ego clearly, to see the pattern of I am for what it is. But perhaps you notice it keeps reasserting itself, pulling you back into the story of me. Why is this pattern of identification so incredibly persistent? This isn't unique to you or even to the path of Buddhism. The elusive, non-solid nature of what we call self is a mystery great thinkers have explored across history and cultures. It's like a deeply ingrained habit, a path worn very deep in the forest of our minds. The mind is simply accustomed to creating and clinging to that feeling of I am. Why is it such a deep habit? Perhaps it's conditioning from a very long time ago, from countless lifetimes, if you follow that perspective in Buddhism. Or perhaps simply the intense conditioning from this life, from childhood, from how we were raised, from culture, from painful or joyful experiences. All of it contributes to building that story of me. The point isn't to figure out exactly why the habit started, but to see that it is just a habit, a pattern, not a real thing. And here's something fascinating. This profound mystery of the self, that feeling of I that seems so undeniable, yet is so hard to pin down when you look deeply. This wasn't just something the Buddha realized under the Bodhi tree. Across thousands of years in different cultures, great thinkers have wrestled with this very question. They too have looked inwards, looked at the world, and seen that this so-called self isn't quite what we usually imagine. Let's step outside of Buddhism for a moment. Hundreds of years after the Buddha, a Scottish philosopher named David Hume sat down and observed his own mind. He said that when he looked inside, he couldn't find a stable, separate self. He only found a constant flow of perceptions, thoughts, feelings, sensations. He famously said, "I never can catch myself at any time without a perception, and never can observe anything but the perception." Think about that for a moment. When you look inside yourself, do you find a solid you that exists independently of your thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations? Or do you just find thoughts, feelings, sensations coming and going? Sound familiar? It's very close to what the Buddha taught about Anatta, looking at the 5 aggregates and seeing nothing is a permanent self. Jump forward to the 20th century. Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the fathers of existentialism, also grappled with this. He saw the self, or ego, not as a thing, but as something we create through our actions and our awareness. The self is not something that exists like a thing. It's a product of our actions, of our awareness. Again, this echoes the Buddhist insight. The self we identify with is constructed, aggregate upon aggregate, moment upon moment. In our own time, spiritual teachers like Eckhart Tolle speak of the ego as a mental structure that lives off resistance and drama. When we try to fight the ego, we're giving it the very energy it needs to survive, resistance and drama. This connects perfectly back to the trap of trying to fight it. And the great Indian thinker, Krishnamurti, went straight to the heart of the matter. He said, "Freedom is not in overcoming the self, it's in the total absence of the self." Not about destroying it, but seeing it so clearly that it simply isn't there anymore, with its controlling power. That the Buddha wasn't presenting some exotic, faraway idea. He was pointing to a fundamental human experience. These thinkers, from different times and cultures, have all stumbled upon aspects of the same truth. And the Buddha's response to this mystery, not a complex philosophy, not a set of rules about what to believe. He offered a simple, profound invitation. An invitation to look inside honestly, without judgment, without trying to find anything specific or push anything away. Look, wake up, see clearly. That was his teaching. No need for endless theories about what the ego is. Just look at what's happening in your mind right now. See the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations. See the I voice. And just see it. That honesty, that direct seeing. That's the path. That's why the ego keeps fooling us, because we keep believing that pattern is real. But the path isn't about understanding why the pattern is there in a complicated way. It's about seeing the pattern as a pattern in the very moment it appears. And in that seeing, its power dissolves. Not by force, but by clear recognition. Chapter 5. The Quiet Presence. What Remains. If you're not the ego, not your story, not this body, not that thought, then who are you? Perhaps you don't need to answer. Maybe the question itself is the final barrier. In stillness, in mindfulness, in this very breath, there is peace. There is knowing without a knower. There is doing without a doer. There is love without a me who loves. Just life, just awareness, free from clinging. And if you still feel like asking, so who am I really? Then maybe you're not ready to hear the answer. Because the question still comes from where ego clings. Only when you no longer need to be someone do you touch what's real. So don't try to kill the ego. Just stop believing everything it says. Like a dream, it feels real until you wake up. And when you truly see, you don't need to say, I have no ego. You don't need to say anything. You just smile and live and let go. May you be free. May you be at peace. May you return to what was never lost.